Over 1,700 stores across every single province in Canada, more locations than Tim Hortons has in some regions, and a market value north of $38 billion, Dollarama is not just a dollar store anymore. It is one of the most powerful retail empires this country has ever built. And it built that empire on one simple promise: low prices for everyday Canadians struggling with the cost of living. But behind those bright yellow and blue signs and those packed, narrow aisles, something does not add up, because Quebec courts have approved class action settlements against the company. The Bank of Canada has published research tracking how tariffs are quietly pushing prices higher on the shelf. And shoppers across the country are slowly realizing that the deal they think they are getting is not always the deal they are actually getting. So today, we are walking through everything every single Canadian should know before they shop at Dollarama again. Some of this will make you a smarter shopper. Some of this might genuinely frustrate you. And by the time we get to the end, you will never walk into one of these stores the same way again. Let's get into it. First, the eco-fee lawsuit that Dollarama never wanted you to hear about. Back in 2023, a Quebec consumer filed a class action lawsuit in the Superior Court of Quebec alleging that Dollarama was not properly displaying the total price of products subject to environmental handling fees. These are the fees attached to things like batteries, electronics, light bulbs, and toys that use batteries. The lawsuit claimed Dollarama was charging customers a final price at the register that was higher than what was actually advertised on the shelf, which on a small scale might look like nothing, just a few cents here and there. But multiply that across hundreds of millions of transactions every single year, and the numbers stop being small. The company never admitted any wrongdoing and has consistently denied liability, but it still agreed to a settlement by February 2024. That settlement was valued at roughly $2.5 million. And shoppers who had purchased eligible items at Dollarama anywhere in Canada between the years covering 2019 through 2023 were told they could claim compensation in the form of an Interact transfer. The court in Quebec approved the deal in December of 2024, and by the time the claim window closed in February 2025, approved claimants were receiving Interact payments worth between $3 and $10, depending on how many people filed. Some sources at the time put the total settlement value closer to $2.6 million once legal fees and administration were factored in, and the lawyer who represented the plaintiffs told reporters that almost immediately after the lawsuit was filed, Dollarama changed its pricing display practices nationwide, which tells you everything you need to know. The company moved fast, not because it wanted to, but because it had no other choice. Here is what you do with this information. When you are buying anything with an eco-fee attached, batteries, light bulbs, small electronics, anything battery powered, look closely at the shelf tag and make sure the full price, including that fee, is clearly broken out before you get to the register. If the number on your receipt does not match what was advertised, you have every right to ask why. And you have legal precedent on your side, because a Canadian court has already ruled this exact practice was worth millions of dollars in compensation. Second, the no return policy that catches almost everyone off guard at some point. Dollarama operates on what the company itself calls a no exchange, no return policy. This is written directly into their official terms posted on their own website. In plain language, this means that once you walk out of that store with a product in your bag, you generally cannot bring it back just because you changed your mind. You do not like the color. You bought the wrong size. None of that matters under the standard policy. The only exceptions the company explicitly allows are if the product is defective, if the product arrived damaged, or in the case of online orders, if you did not receive what you actually ordered. And even then, there is a strict process. For online purchases, you have 30 days from the date of shipment to notify Dollarama through their official contact form. And you need to include a picture of the damaged or defective item along with a picture of the original packaging. The product also needs to be unused and returned in its original packaging, in essentially the same condition it arrived in. Shipping and handling charges are explicitly non-refundable under the terms, and if your return is accepted, the company will cover the cost of sending it back and give you a tracking link. But if you bought something inside a physical Dollarama store rather than online, the process tends to be a little less rigid in practice. Plenty of shoppers online describe walking into a store with a defective item and a receipt and getting a same-day exchange with zero pushback from staff. even though it technically falls outside the strict written policy. The practical lesson here is simple. Always keep your receipt because without it, you have almost no leverage if something goes wrong. And if you are buying something that has any realistic chance of being defective, electronics, anything with batteries, anything mechanical, open the packaging and check it the moment you get home rather than weeks later, because that 30-day window is firm and it starts ticking the day the product ships or the day you buy it in store. Third, the maximum price ceiling that defines almost everything about how this company operates. Dollarama has built its entire business model around strict price tiers, and the company has been explicit in public statements that it does not intend to push its food item ceiling above $2 or introduce a new pricing category above $4. Even as costs rise around it, this matters more than it sounds like it does because it means when input costs go up, whether from tariffs, minimum wage increases, or supplier price hikes, Dollarama cannot simply raise the sticker price the way a grocery store or pharmacy can. Instead, the company has a long history of doing something quieter. It shrinks the package, it changes the item count inside the package, or it swaps to a slightly cheaper version of the same category of product, so the $4 price tag stays exactly where it was. But what is actually inside that package has changed. This is the same shrinkflation pattern that has been documented across grocery retail in Canada for years, and Dollarama is not exempt from it just because the price tag looks frozen in time. The lesson for shoppers is to stop assuming that a stable price means a stable deal. If you have a favorite item at Dollarama, take a few seconds every couple of months to actually check the weight, the count, or the volume printed on the package, because that is the number that is quietly moving even when the price is not. Fourth, the tariff story that is actively reshaping what you pay right now in 2025 and into 2026. Canada implemented retaliatory tariffs in response to United States trade actions. And Dollarama's own chief executive, Neil Rossi, told shareholders directly that the company could not rule out raising prices on goods that were hit by those tariffs, particularly anything imported from the United States where there are limited sourcing alternatives. He gave a specific example publicly. Plastic molded items can be sourced from manufacturers all over the world, so the company has flexibility there. But something like a chocolate bar made specifically in a Pennsylvania factory has very few substitute suppliers, which means tariffs on that category translate almost directly into either a smaller bar or a price increase. Research published through the Bank of Canada's own research series went further and quantified this. The analysis found that products subject to Canada's counter tariffs rose in price by roughly 6% more than comparable products that were not subject to those tariffs. And the researchers estimated that the tariff situation added approximately 0.3 of a percentage point to overall inflation. Separately, Statistics Canada reported that the Consumer Price Index rose 2.4% year over year in March 2026, up from 1.8% the month before, driven heavily by a historic monthly spike in gasoline prices tied to international conflict. All of this matters to you directly because Dollarama has stated outright that it tries to avoid raising prices on items that are not directly affected by these added costs in order to stay competitive, which is the right instinct. But it also means the items that are affected by tariffs or import costs are quietly absorbing a real and measurable price increase. And the only way to actually notice this as a shopper is to pay attention to where products are manufactured, because country of origin labels on the back of the package are becoming a much more useful piece of information than they used to be. Fifth, why this company keeps growing even while Canadians say they feel poorer. Dollarama just reported fiscal 2026 results, showing consolidated sales rising over 13% to roughly $7.3 billion, with Canadian same-store sales growing 4.2% for the full year, and the most recent first quarter of fiscal 2027 showed sales jumping over 21% compared to the same period a year earlier, climbing past $1.8 billion in a single quarter. The company's own chief financial officer told analysts directly that Canadians continue to face inflation and rising costs, including on fuel and everyday goods, and that this reinforces just how important affordability has become in people's purchasing decisions. In other words, the exact same economic pressure that is squeezing your household budget is the fuel driving record-breaking growth for this company. Every time a grocery bill feels heavier than it used to, more shoppers walk into a Dollarama looking for a cheaper version of the same item, and the company has been opening new stores aggressively to meet that demand. 60 to 70 net new Canadian locations planned for fiscal 2027 alone, with a long-term target of 2,200 stores across the country by 2034, plus an expansion into Mexico through its Dollarcity partnership and a recent acquisition of an Australian discount chain. This is not a company that is struggling. It is a company whose entire growth story depends on the cost of living staying high, which puts you, the shopper, in a strange position. You are the reason the company is thriving, and the company is thriving specifically because your other options have become more expensive. Sixth, the loyalty partnership most shoppers do not even know exists. Dollarama itself has never run a traditional in-house points card, the way a grocery chain or a pharmacy might. For years, the company openly said it had no formal loyalty program at all. But that changed when Air Miles announced a nationwide partnership with Dollarama. The rollout started in Atlantic Canada and expanded across the country, allowing anyone with an Air Miles account to collect reward miles simply by shopping at Dollarama the same way they would at any other partner retailer. This covers essentially everything in the store. General merchandise like party supplies, office supplies, kitchenware, hardware, toys, and apparel, as well as consumables like cleaning products, health and beauty items, pet supplies, snacks, and seasonal goods. At one point, Bank of Montreal even offered its own Air Miles credit card holders a temporary promotion to earn 5 times the normal miles on Dollarama purchases, and Air Miles separately rolled out a receipt scanning feature that lets collectors photograph an eligible receipt within 14 days of purchase to claim bonus miles, even without presenting a physical card at checkout. The Air Miles program itself is enormous, with more than 10 million active collector accounts representing roughly half of all Canadian households, which means there is a very real chance you already have an account sitting dormant that you have simply never linked to your Dollarama shopping. The lesson here is straightforward. If you are someone who already collects Air Miles through groceries, gas, or pharmacy purchases, there is no reason to leave Dollarama purchases out of that loop. It costs nothing to scan or link a receipt, and over a year of regular dollar store trips, those small mile accumulations genuinely add up toward merchandise, travel, or instant redemptions at the register. Seventh, the gift card fine print almost nobody actually reads. Dollarama sells both physical gift cards in store and virtual gift cards through its website that can be emailed directly to a recipient. The terms and conditions are printed on the back of the physical card and posted in full within the company's official terms and conditions document online, and they matter more than people assume. If you are buying a virtual gift card to send to someone else, the company places the responsibility entirely on you to verify that the recipient's email address is correct. The official terms state plainly that Dollarama is not responsible for a gift card that gets sent to the wrong email, which means a single typo in an email address could mean that money is essentially gone with very limited recourse. The same terms also reinforce that the no exchange, no return policy applies broadly across the platform, with refunds only available in narrow defective, damaged, or wrong item scenarios. So if you are buying gift cards as presents, particularly around the holidays when gifting volume spikes, take the extra few seconds to double check the spelling of the email address before you hit send, and keep your order confirmation in case you ever need to reference it. Ninth, the layout tricks that quietly increase what you spend without you noticing. Walk into almost any Dollarama location and you will notice the same pattern that shows up across discount retail generally. The most frequently needed items, the milk, the bread, the basic cleaning supplies, tend to sit toward the back or scattered through the middle of the store rather than right at the entrance, which means you naturally walk past dozens of other products before you even reach the thing you came in for. The checkout line itself is lined with small impulse items, candy, seasonal trinkets, tiny gadgets, things priced low enough that they feel harmless to toss in the basket while you wait. And because the price tiers in this store top out so low compared to a grocery store or pharmacy, the psychological barrier to grabbing one more item is much weaker than it would be anywhere else. A $4 ad on barely registers as a decision the way a $15 impulse buy at a different retailer might. This is not unique to Dollarama. It is standard practice across discount and grocery retail worldwide. But it is worth naming directly because the entire pricing structure of this particular chain, where almost everything sits between $1 and $4, makes that impulse spending feel even smaller and even easier to justify in the moment. The simple defense is the oldest one in retail. Walk in with a short list, stick to it as closely as you can, and treat the checkout aisle items as something you consciously choose rather than something you grab on autopilot while you wait. For the person ahead of you, 10th, the simple habits that actually protect your wallet inside the store. Always check your receipt before you leave, particularly on anything with an eco fee like batteries or small electronics, because the legal history here shows this exact category has already cost the company millions in a court settlement. Always compare the unit price rather than just the sticker price. A $4 item that used to contain more product for the same $4 is not actually the same deal. It was a year ago. Keep an eye on country of origin, labeling on anything that looks like it might be affected by cross-border tariffs, because pricing on those specific categories is the part of the store most likely to move upward in the near future. Hold on to every receipt for at least 30 days, because that is your entire window for a refund or exchange if something turns out to be defective or damaged. Link your existing Air Miles account if you already have one. Rather than leaving that value on the table, double check the email address on any virtual gift card before sending it, and walk in with a list so the checkout aisle impulse buys stay a choice rather than a habit. And finally, remember that Dollarama genuinely does offer real value on a huge range of products. Cleaning supplies, party goods, seasonal decor, basic stationery, and plenty of household items are still priced lower than you will find almost anywhere else in the country. The goal here is not to avoid the store. The goal is to walk in with your eyes open, knowing exactly which parts of the experience are working in your favor and which parts require a little more attention than they used to. Dollarama built one of the most successful retail businesses in Canadian history by being fast, cheap, and everywhere, growing from a single Montreal area store back in 1992 into a coast-to-coast chain worth tens of billions of dollars on the Toronto Stock Exchange. And for millions of Canadians, it remains a genuinely useful part of how they stretch a tight budget every single week, especially during a period where grocery prices, fuel costs, and borrowing costs have all climbed at the same time. But useful does not mean above scrutiny. And a company this large, with a market value in the tens of billions of dollars, with court-ordered settlements already on its record involving how it displays prices, with public statements from its own chief executive admitting that certain prices are likely to rise because of tariffs, and with quarter after quarter of record-breaking sales growth driven directly by Canadians feeling financially squeezed, deserves the exact same level of attention from shoppers that any major retailer does. The convenience of having a Dollarama on practically every corner in this country is real, and the savings on dozens of everyday categories are real too. But neither of those things means you should stop paying attention the moment you walk through the door. So the next time you find yourself walking down one of those crowded yellow and blue aisles with a basket in hand, take the extra 10 seconds before you reach the register. Check the receipt against the shelf tag. Check the unit price against what you remember paying last time. Check where the product was actually made, and ask yourself honestly whether the item in your hand is something you came in for or something the layout of the store just convinced you to grab. Because in an economy where every single Canadian household is looking for the best possible deal, the most powerful tool you actually have walking into any store, Dollarama included, is simply paying attention.